let's tell Light. Matsuda!
Buddy, you're a boy, make a big noise.
Welcome back, everyone. Episode 16, Decision. So the episode starts off in the woods, which probably sounds a bit odd, but all will be revealed in due time.
I hereby relinquish ownership of this Death Note.
So I'm imagining that because Misa left her Death Note with Light, the moment she relinquished ownership of it, it immediately became his Death Note, seeing as he already had it in his possession. Which, I guess, interestingly enough, means Light is possessed by both Rim and Ryuk, at least for the moment. Anyway, having given Rim instructions for what to do with the additional notebook, he watches as she flies off.
Just as I thought, as long as I still have Ryuk's notebook, even though I gave up Rem's, all awareness I have of Rem still remains.
As it should. Forfeiting ownership of that notebook shouldn't cause any sort of memory loss. For starters, Light was technically only in possession of it for a day, if that. Furthermore, since Light has had his notebook for substantially longer, any memories that were taken away by relinquishing ownership of Misa's notebook would automatically be filled back in by retaining ownership of his own.
Rem, the only reason I have to go through all this trouble is because you brought another Death Note to the human world.
He does have a point. Rim bringing that notebook to Misa threw the biggest, clunkiest fucking wrench into his game plan, and ultimately changed the course of this entire story. Now, I wouldn't go so far as to say Light wouldn't have encountered any other problems had it not been for her, but I'd definitely say that it's unlikely he would have ever put himself in this shitty of a situation. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Anyway, with Rim gone, Ryuk asks Light if this is what he really wants to do. Obviously, at this point, we have no idea what his plan is, but apparently it involves burying his Death Note in the woods, which is, like, I want to say that's a little reckless, but at the same time, not really. What are the odds that someone would be digging out in the middle of the woods, you know? Anyway, Light goes on to tell Ryuk that despite him leaving the notebook out here, he's not relinquishing ownership of it, saying,
"It stays mine. Until the next time you hear me say, get rid of it. When I say that, assume that I want to relinquish ownership of this Death Note."
We then switch scenes back to Task Force headquarters where Misa is waking up.
Mr. Stalker? Hello, mister? Where are you right now? Do you think we could stop this game?
Stalker? Where'd you get that? What's with a new attitude all of a sudden?
So this is pretty interesting because up until this point, relinquishing ownership of the notebook has only been mentioned. We had no idea what the aftermath of making that decision would actually do to a person. And I actually have a lot that I want to say on this, but we'll get into a deeper discussion about it later on.
She's been acting like this ever since she regained consciousness.
Seriously? Does she think she can get out of this just by playing dumb?
And their frustration is understandable. There's more than enough evidence to prove that she's the second Kidda. So, to them, it just seems like she's fucking around by referring to L as Mr. Stalker. Like, you were just about to bite off your tongue in part because you knew you were guilty. But now you're acting like you're completely innocent? Except, she's not acting. Like, it's such a weird situation for all of them, honestly. Also, I like the added shot of the chief off on his own, looking pretty defeated, which makes sense. His son was in a relationship with the second Kidda. Ryuzaki saw it with his own eyes. That's not a coincidence, and he knows it. It's really just a matter of time before the truth comes out, and he needs to prepare himself for that. Anyway, with Misa acting the way she is, Ryuzaki reaches out to Mogi and asks him if he made it clear to her what she was being arrested for, and he confirms that he did.
First, I blindfolded her and covered her mouth. I told her that we knew she was the second Kira. She didn't struggle when I put the blindfold and handcuffs on her. It was like she accepted it.
And again, we will get into this a little later, and trust me, I have quite a bit to say about it, but for now, let's move on. We see Misa continue to barter for her freedom, which is just kind of sad, especially now that she's essentially innocent. Like, I know she's not, I'm very much aware of the fact that she's a piece of shit, but since she has no recollection of her crimes, this just feels really fucked up. It gets even worse when she says,
I need to go to the bathroom. I have to go to the bathroom again, okay?
Plus, you'd be able to watch. Isn't that what you want? Isn't it? You pervert!
Like, this is gross. She's literally in tears, bartering with them about being able to use the restroom, knowing they'll be watching just so she can have a moment where she's not tied up. This is fucked up. But yeah, Ryuzaki is confused as hell, especially considering how he felt that they were moments away from getting her to crack. Anyway, after a frustrating exchange between Ryuzaki and Misa, Matsuda decides to chime in.
Hey, Amane! No one's buying this, so cut it out!
And I find this interesting because, for the most part, Matsuda is pretty chill. If he's expressing any emotion, it's usually excitement or confusion. But here we see him succumbing to his anger and frustration. And given the role he plays in how this story ends, it's interesting to see a glimpse of this other side of him here. But yeah, I also like the fact that upon seeing how she starts freaking out after he yells at her, his expression immediately changes. You can tell he feels kind of bad about it, which I like. He's definitely the most sensitive character on the task force, and I feel like this speaks to that, if only marginally. Anyway, Misa and Ryuzaki continue their conversation, with Ryuzaki trying to coax information out of her. Information that, in reality, is no longer there. Ryuzaki then gets a call on his cell phone.
Good timing, it's late.
Again, love the attention to detail regarding the chief. Dude has been despondent this entire time. But the moment Ryuzaki mentions Light is calling him, he starts paying attention. Anyway, the phone call is brief, as it's mostly just Light letting Ryuzaki know that he's at the hotel. Ryuzaki then has Matsu to bring him in, and he says,
Ryuzaki, like I said over the phone, I could be Kira.
So, at first glance, this seems odd. Ryuzaki himself later states that they don't have any evidence on him. There's nothing tangible that undeniably ties him to being Kira. For Misa, sure, the tapes have her DNA on them, but Light is in the clear right now. It's really the only reason that he hasn't been brought in yet, despite them arresting Misa 4 days ago. He's clean, for all intents and purposes. And yet, he's here confessing that he could be Kira. Anyway, Light's father responds, well, about as well as you might think he would.
No, Light! Why would you even say something like that?
And honestly, you can't help but feel for this guy. For months, he stood steadfast and resolute in his belief that his son is innocent, only for said son to now come in and admit to possibly being Kira. But yeah, while the chief is swept away by his emotions, Ryuzaki remains firmly planted in his belief that this is all bullshit.
It's an act. There's no could be about it. You are Kira.
But still, like any good detective, he wonders what Light's motives are here. The scene continues with Light going over the events of the story as they relate to what the task force already knows. Light recalls being followed by Ray Penber, who died shortly after tailing him. He brings up the fact that he was in Aoyama on May 22nd, and the fact that shortly after, he was approached by Misa Amane, the second Kira. He then goes on to say that Ryuzaki is
the world's best detective. And right now he seems pretty sure that I'm Kira. We know L's never been wrong before.
Going on to add that if he were L, he would also think that he's Kira. And I'm gonna come back to that specific quote later, but for now, what he's saying is fair. It's 100% fair. I mean, in laying it out like that, who else could it be but him? But what if it wasn't? Or rather, what if he was doing it without even realizing it?
You see, subconsciously I might be Kira. If that were the case, I could be him and not even know it.
And that's when it becomes clear to Ryuzaki what his goal is. Plausible deniability at the psychological level. Maybe I am Kira, but if I am, I'm not doing it on purpose, which honestly is a pretty weak defense at face value. I mean, even Ryuzaki thinks as much.
Does he really think that he'll be let off the hook if he can just prove he wasn't conscious of being Kira?
Right? Because even if you did use that as a defense, this idea that
another me could be killing people as I sleep,
then honestly, they're still within their rights to put you down. Because whether or not you're aware of what you're doing, it doesn't change the fact that it's still being done. Like, going off of this theory, just having you exist is a danger to society. Because what if one night you went to sleep and instead of killing criminals, you killed, I don't know, children or something? You can't control it, right? So you can't say who you'll target. Like, it's just a flimsy argument. But whatever, Ryuzaki makes it clear that this theory is bullshit, given the fact that they had his room bugged for several days and found no evidence to support that. And before we continue, I do want to take this moment to give kudos to Light on how well he's acting in this scene. Because while we know this is all bullshit, his performance does lend a certain level of believability to what he's saying. His uneasy tone of voice, the sweat marks going down his face, his astonished reaction at hearing about the cameras, he's doing a really good job at selling this, and I gotta give credit where credit is due. Anyway, after a brief back and forth regarding the cameras, Light says,
I have to admit, I've found myself thinking that some criminals deserve to die. If I can think like Kira, then how can I be sure that I'm not actually him?
And what a brilliant fucking line that was. Now, at first glance, it might seem like a weird take, especially coming from someone living in Japan, where more than 80% of the population are in support of the death penalty. And hell, that number was slightly higher in 2004, which is when this anime is said to have taken place. So this idea that he's somehow completely in the wrong for thinking certain criminals deserve to die seems kinda dumb, especially when you consider the fact that, according to these numbers, 3 of these men should at least somewhat agree with what he's saying. That's why it should come as no surprise that one of them does agree with him, saying,
Hold on, Light. I feel exactly the same way. I found myself thinking before that some people would be better off dead.
And this is precisely why this was such a brilliant move. Guess who Light now has on his side? Matsuda. And I'm not saying Matsuda is going to be his ride or die like the chief, but Matsuda has made it clear that he empathizes with Light, that he can understand that sort of mindset. If nothing else, Matsuda isn't going to be as quick to opt for killing Light, especially as he goes on to outright defend him.
Besides, criminals were still being killed even while you had no knowledge of them. I mean, the surveillance cameras proved it, didn't they?
It's perfect for him. Of the 4 people in this room, 2 are now advocating for his innocence. And while a lot of what Matsuda is saying stems from his overwhelming respect for the chief, it doesn't change the fact that he's still in Light's corner. But what about Aizawa? Does he stand with Light?
Well, no.
Care to elaborate on that for us, big guy?
We weren't able to watch him every hour of the day. It's possible he could have found some way to kill those criminals while he wasn't at home.
And again, this shows the brilliance of that original line. While it didn't sway Aizawa to his side the way it did Matsuda, at least now he knows where he stands with both of them. Or hell, where he stands with everyone on the task force, minus Mogi, obviously. Regardless, it was hella smart, and for that, Light Yagami, you get a gold star. But yeah, Ryuzaki mulls over the information he's been presented with, coming to the conclusion that Light's goal is to be imprisoned, and that after he is, criminals will just continue dying, thus proving his innocence. Which is a solid theory, and one that would ultimately bolster the argument that Light is innocent. Anyway, before we continue, I just want to comment on this shot, this moment where Ryuzaki's mouth is moving in the reflection, but not in reality. I don't think there's really anything to read into with this, but I think it's a really unique artistic choice for the moment, and yeah. Anyway, Ryuzaki ultimately ends up saying,
"Let's do it. I need you to fully restrain Light Yagami and place him in solitary confinement."
But not before making it clear that he does not like the way this is going, which is fair, because this just seems like it's ultimately a huge waste of time. It's very clear to Ryuzaki what Light's goal is, to bolster his argument that he's not Kira by setting it up so criminals keep dying while he's locked up. And while Ryuzaki feels confident that this is Light's plan, he can't really do anything to stop it. I mean, it's not like he can just let Light leave after he's made a declaration like this. So yeah. Anyway, the chief and Matsuda take issue with this, coming to Light's defense. Aizawa, however, does not. Just thought I'd point that out. Regardless, Light tells him that it's fine, necessary even, but he does add,
"But Ryuzaki, promise me this. Until you can say with absolute certainty that I'm not Kira, you cannot set me free, no matter what I might say or what condition I might be in."
And we're gonna come back to this particular line in just a moment. But anyway, for now, that's it. Light has been taken into custody by Aizawa, and welcome back to How to Use It. First up, the time and condition of death can be changed, but once the victim's name has been written, the individual's death can never be avoided. So, while simple, this is actually a pretty important one, especially considering the previous rule, stating that you can cross certain characters out with 2 straight lines to nullify their effect. It seems that you can do that for anything except for the name. Once you've written down a name, it's a wrap. That person will die. So yeah, that's very important to know. Anyway, next up we have, if you lose the Death Note or have it stolen, you will lose its ownership unless you retrieve it within 490 days. Okay, so this is an interesting one. It doesn't necessarily apply to our story, but it is interesting to think that you'd have over a year to try and find a missing Death Note. But yeah, there's not much more to say about this one, so moving on. Things pick back up with Ryuzaki watching over both Light and Misa as they sit in their respective holding cells. As he's watching them, the chief comes in and says,
"I'd like to request that you take me off this investigation."
Going on to explain that there's no way for him to remain impartial now that they have his son in custody. Like, it was one thing when Light was considered a suspect, because with so little evidence against him, and with the chief's own moral compass assuring him that his son was innocent, he was willing to trudge along, waiting for the others to share that sentiment. Sure, he had moments where he lashed out, but for the most part, he remained composed, despite feeling rather insulted that they would think Light was capable of being Kira. But now it looks like Light may very well be Kira, and the chief knows that he can't be here for this. Not just because of the clear conflict of interest, but because, I mean, it's his fucking son. Emotionally speaking, this is probably one of, if not the most difficult thing he's ever had to deal with. Well, thus far, anyway. Anyway, the chief and Ryuzaki go back and forth, and as per usual with Ryuzaki, he remains very much emotionless, even as he says stuff like,
"To be honest, I wondered what you might do. I believe you'd kill your son and then yourself."
So in the last episode, I mentioned Ryuzaki's callous indifference, and it's on display again here, just casually eating fruit as he talks about the chief's possible desire to kill his son and then himself. Like, it's honestly kind of jarring, which is why I think it's appropriate that the chief responds by saying,
"Ryuzaki, I will ask that you confine me as well. At the moment, I'm calm. But to be honest, I'm not sure how much more of this I can take.
I also just really love the aggressive look on his face as he delivers that line. Like he's looking directly at Ryuzaki, kinda like he wants to fuck him up. But yeah, Ryuzaki says he'll allow the chief to confine himself, however, he'll still have to maintain regular contact with his friends and family. In addition to that, the task force will continue updating him on any changes regarding the investigation. Anyway, after that, we fast forward 3 days and get a glimpse at how 3 of our inmates are doing. The chief seems pretty despondent, which makes sense. Misa seems better, as she's asking for the opportunity to take a bath, and not in a sexual favor kind of way. And Light, well, he's asking about the investigation and whether or not any criminals have died since he's been incarcerated. And oddly enough, we find out that not a single person has died.
Since you've been detained, we haven't had one report of a criminal being killed by Kira.
Which is interesting. Even Light seems surprised, claiming,
Wait, no one's been killed? Really? So it's only a matter of time before I'm convicted as Kira.
And it's confusing, very confusing, especially for Ryuzaki, because it seems so simple, so obvious as to what Light was doing, and yet now we're seeing evidence of the opposite. Now we're seeing an irrefutable correlation between Light's incarceration and Kira's killings coming to a halt. But yeah, before we leave, I want to point out something that I just noticed. Ryuk is casting a shadow, which is kind of weird, especially considering the fact that Rim did not cast a shadow in the previous episode under similar circumstances. But, okay. Anyway, we transition to the 5th day and everybody's a little worse for wear. Ryuk's going through withdrawals again.
I can't take this anymore.
While Light is tempering his own resolve.
I just have to get through this.
Misa's back to offering herself up sexually for an ounce of freedom.
You know what, Mr. Stalker? Your video won't sell if it's just me sitting here the whole time.
Which, again, just, oh my gosh. And then we have the chief who's a bit unhinged.
Mr. Yagami.
What is it? Is it good news? Is it bad news?
And I'm not gonna beat this dead horse anymore. He's obviously frustrated and we obviously know why, but fuck me, y'all. This episode is just downright depressing. Everyone's just in a shitty mood. You got these 4 locked up, these 2 feeling bad for their chief, and Ryuzaki's just confused as hell as to what's even going on at this point. It's just, fuck. Okay, moving on. We transition to day 7 of their incarceration. Ryuzaki checks in on Light, asking him how he's doing, and Light responds by saying,
I know I must look pretty bad in here, but this useless pride, I suppose I'll have to. Get rid of it.
He said it! He said it!
That he did, Peter, and with that single phrase, he too has relinquished ownership of his notebook. But the real question is, what? What's he have to gain by forfeiting ownership? I suppose, at first glance, it solves one significant problem, which is the effect solitary confinement has on a person's psyche. I briefly mentioned it in my video for episode 10, but solitary confinement is a rather cruel form of punishment. Like, there are studies that attest to just how psychologically damaging it can be for an individual. Humans are inherently social creatures, and being deprived of that can really fuck you up. I'm talking anxiety, paranoia, psychosis, none of which would be good for Light, given how he needs to ensure he doesn't slip up and say something that he shouldn't. So, what's a quick and efficient way to make it impossible for Light to say something that he shouldn't? Well, just wipe away any memory of it. It doesn't do much for the solitary confinement, sure, but at least he won't ever have to worry about screwing up and saying the wrong thing. But obviously there's more to him relinquishing ownership than just that, as we'll come to find out. Anyway, I like the immediate difference we see in Light after he forfeits ownership. And what makes it even more interesting is that it's conveyed to us via his eye. The way it shifts from being a sort of rhombus to an oval. It feels like the difference between Little Yugi and the Pharaoh. Also, it's a really brief moment, but you can actually see Ryuzaki noticing an immediate difference in Light after he forfeits ownership. He obviously doesn't know what happened, but it's interesting that he could immediately tell something was different. But yeah, Light then says,
Ryuzaki, I realize that I asked you to put me in here, but I just realized this whole thing's completely pointless because I'm not Kira.
Okay, so now it's time to talk about this whole situation regarding relinquishing ownership of the Death Note. Specifically, the aspect regarding memories, because how exactly does this work? Let's start with Misa. Right now, she currently has no recollection of why she was brought here. No idea why they blindfolded her and strapped her down to this table. And honestly, I didn't have an issue with that. I also didn't have an issue with the fact that in order to make sense of what's happened to her, she's concocted this theory that the person keeping her here is a crazy stalker. I mean, given her line of work, it makes sense that she would jump to that conclusion. I was willing to believe this despite the fact that she was told why she was being detained by Mogi when he arrested her, and the fact that Watson Watari was torturing her for 3 days trying to coax information out of her regarding the Kira investigation. But since all of that happened before she relinquished ownership, I was willing to give it a pass. I was willing to say, hey, those memories must have been taken when she forfeited ownership of the notebook. I mean, after all, she's the first person we've seen it happen to, so she's our baseline for what this is supposed to look like. But then we get to our boy Light and shit starts getting inconsistent. Because after he relinquishes ownership of his notebook, he, for whatever reason, was able to not only acknowledge the fact that he was speaking to L, but also the fact that he is here because he's under suspicion of being Kira. For context, let me show you what I'm talking about.
Mr. Stalker? Hello, mister? Where are you right now?
Do you know why I'm detaining you here? You must have some idea.
What do you mean? Because I'm a celebrity, obviously.
Versus
Ryuzaki, I realized that I asked you to put me in here, but I just realized this whole thing's completely pointless because I'm not Kira.
Do you see the inherent problem with this? You have two people who were detained for identical reasons because they were assumed to be Kira. Both of these people have also chosen to forfeit ownership of their respective death notes. Yet while one of them had both the memory of why they were incarcerated and who they were incarcerated by completely erased, the other remembers exactly why they were put there and who put them there. How does that make sense? And I get that this might seem like a nitpick, but having it play out like this makes a difference in how it's interpreted by the task force. Think about it. If Light had started acting the same way Misa did, befuddled and disoriented, then that would have been a pretty clear indicator that something happened to them, that their memories were scrubbed or erased or forfeited. But instead, because Light knows that he volunteered to be here, it makes it seem like he just had a sudden change of heart, which is jarring, sure, but not as jarring as if he had suddenly started saying, "Where am I? Is anyone out there? How did I get here? What do you want with me?" Retaining those two aspects of his imprisonment changes everything about how this is perceived, and it just doesn't make sense. Like, I got so irritated I went to the manga for reference on this particular rule, and it says that the owner will only lose the memories involving the death note, and that's fine, but it still doesn't change the fact that they're exhibiting vastly different degrees of memory loss here. I'm cool with either option, either her remembering more or him remembering less, but it's difficult to reconcile with how inconsistent this currently is. So, since it would fundamentally change the story significantly if Light lost more of his memory, given how it would make it undeniably obvious that they did something to themselves if both of them suddenly experienced full retrograde amnesia, I'm going to instead focus on determining why Misa lost so much more of her memory than Light. My first theory is, maybe relinquishing ownership of a notebook obliterates your short-term memory. I mean, Misa forfeited ownership roughly 4 days into her incarceration, whereas Light did so 7 days into his. So maybe Light did lose a few days, but it didn't make a difference because it was all time he spent in the cell anyway. Though, all things considered, that seems highly unlikely. Anyway, my second theory centers around the fact that Misa never saw anyone after being detained. She left the school and was immediately captured. And after that, the only voices she likely heard were Mogi's, Ryuzaki's, and Watari's. So with no clear memory of who was who, maybe she just lost it all. This theory holds some weight because Misa still remembers Light, even though she only met him for the first time 4 days prior to being arrested. And during those 4 days, they only ever really talked about the Death Note, their Shinigami, and how to use both of them in order to kill Ryuzaki. And all of those memories are now gone, and yet she still remembers being in a relationship with him. Furthermore, it would also explain why Light immediately knew he was speaking to Ryuzaki, since Ryuzaki was the last person he saw before being put here. So my theory is, because she didn't see anyone and has no way to cement those memories to any specific person, she just lost it all, I guess. But honestly, I'm not a big fan of that theory either. Which brings me to my last theory, and the one I consider my own personal headcanon. She lost her memories because of what she endured with Watari. Because it's no secret that he tortured her. I mean, just look at this table full of shit. You know he was doing some fucked up shit to her. You got 2, possibly 3 vials filled with some sort of dark liquid. You got 2 beakers, one filled with some clear liquid while the other is filled with something green. And then you have a... Wait, is that a teapot? The fuck? Anyway, my point is, she spent 3 days with this dude, and by the time he got her to talk, the first thing she said was,
"I can't take it anymore. Kill me."
Before then proceeding to try and bite off her own fucking tongue. That's a lot, a whole lot. And traumatic events, such as being tortured, can result in something called dissociative amnesia, which is what I think is happening here. I think forfeiting ownership of her Death Note definitely caused her to lose her memories associated with it, but I think the additional memories being gone are a direct result of the trauma that she went through. It would also make sense as to why she doesn't seem to have any memory of having tried to kill herself. All of it's just tucked away under a blanket of amnesia brought on by trauma. But yeah, those are my theories. I would honestly love to hear y'all's thoughts on why she forgot so much more than Light after forfeiting ownership of her notebook. I am genuinely curious because maybe I'm just missing something, which is totally possible. But yeah, rant over, let's dive back into the story. So in response to what Light said, Ryuzaki says,
I can't do that. I promised you that no matter what you said, I wouldn't let you out until I was convinced that you are not Kira.
So I wanted to come back to that line because it's honestly pretty brilliant on Light's part. The other Light, not this one. Like, it doesn't seem like it right now, given the fact that this new Light wants to get the fuck out of here, but in making Ryuzaki promise that he wouldn't let him out until he was completely convinced, it makes it so that if Light is ever let go, he's basically in the clear. It's even more brilliant because Light made sure to bolster Ryuzaki's accolades in that same scene, telling them all that L is the world's best detective and that he's never been wrong before. It's not that they don't already know this, but in bringing it up again, it makes his eventual seal of approval all the more meaningful. Furthermore, if he ever tries to come after Light again, it'll seem all the less credible because at that point, he would have already said that Light was 100% in the clear. It's brilliant. The only trick now is to get him to believe that Light is innocent, which brings us to the second reason for why Light wiped his memory. He needs to prove that he's innocent, and what better way to do that than actually being innocent?
You have to believe me. I am not Kira. I must have been framed. That's the only explanation for this.
What you're saying is completely absurd, but for some reason, it feels believable to me.
That's because it is. He's a scared kid, and in this state, he's not afraid to show it. Anyway, Aizawa and Matsuda begin discussing things amongst themselves, but with so much evidence stacked against Light, even they know he's as good as guilty. It would take a fucking miracle to get him out of... Jeez, what's the rush, bro?
I just heard 2 weeks worth of criminals were just murdered all at once.
Okay. So 15 days have passed since Light and his father were originally detained, and it appears as though Kira just so happened to be on vacation during that same period. Okay. Anyway, Matsuda is over the moon as he seems to immediately think that this is enough to clear Light. He then joyfully gets on the intercom to inform the chief. The chief, who's looking pretty rough at this point, is relieved, but only marginally. He understands that while this does take some of the heat off of Light, it's not enough to clear him completely.
Well, he's in the gray.
It's a hell of a lot better than being completely guilty.
Anyway, Matsuda, in his excitement, decides to try and reach out to Light, and, Ryuzaki has to calm him down.
Let's tell Light. Matsuda!
Please don't, Mr. Matsuda.
Matsuda?
So, two things. One, I love me an aggressive Ryuzaki. You don't often see it, but it's always a treat when you do. And secondly, I love how Matsuda just repeats his name back like that. It's like, why is that your response to getting hit? Anyway, Ryuzaki doesn't want to tell Light about this, as he feels it'll only complicate things. Instead, he turns on the intercom and says,
Why make this harder than it has to be? Are you ready to confess?
Light then responds by saying,
I'm telling you, you're wrong. But even if the evidence does point to me, I swear to you, this is a setup. I am not Kira. Look at my eyes. You tell me, do these look like the eyes of someone who is lying?
And obviously they don't, because he's not fucking lying right now. We then get Ryuzaki switching back to Misa, asking her if she's ready to tell them who the original Kira is, only for her to respond by saying,
I wish I knew, but I don't. If I did, I'd thank him for punishing the burglar who killed my parents. To me, Kira is a hero.
And it's such a clusterfuck. Nothing makes sense anymore. There's no rhyme or reason to any of this anymore because of what they've done. Misa went from not wanting to say anything to outwardly praising Kira and discussing her relationship with Light. Meanwhile, Light was ready to accept his punishment for being Kira, willfully locking himself away because it was the right thing to do, to now telling them that he's being set up and that he's definitely not Kira. It's just insane, which is why the episode ends with Ryuzaki saying,
I don't understand what's going on here.
And roll credits. Anyway, that's the end of this episode. If you liked the video, then consider dropping a like, and if you really liked it, then consider subscribing. Anyway, that's it for this time. Until next week, friends. Peace.